right. Welcome everyone to this Global Changemakers webinar. My name is Yasmin and this is my colleague Sara. And today
Hello,
we're
everyone.
going to be speaking to you about empathy and social impact. So let me start presenting my screen. Wonderful. So to begin this webinar, we want to quickly give you an overview of what empathy is. And the word empathy, its origin, dates back to the 1880s when a German psychologist called Theodor Lipps coined the term Einfühlung, which I don't know how to pronounce exactly in German, but it means in feeling. And that's a word to describe the emotional appreciation of someone else's feeling, being able to feel the way they feel as if you were inside of them, as if you were able to put on their lenses, to put on their own perspective, or like the metaphor that we're used to, as if you're able to walk in their shoes. And this is different than the word sympathy, because the word sin in Greek, it means together with, it means along with. So it's different than empathy, because empathy has this sense of feeling from inside someone else's point of view, someone else's experience. And sympathy means, relating to them somehow, or feeling alongside them as if you were together with them, but still two different people. So empathy has this very deep example, a very deep concept, a very deep term. Sara, do you want to give us maybe an example of both?
Yes, exactly. So when somebody, let's say a friend tells you a story about something really bad, I don't know, they lost a test or something, they failed a test. When you say something like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you lost your test, right? You failed it." You can sort of know they're feeling bad, but you don't feel what they're feeling. You cannot, if you put yourself in their shoes, then it's going to be completely different. And maybe when we explain the three kinds of empathy, we can maybe with the same example, with other examples, we can understand that term better. But usually when we say, "Oh, it's too bad that happened to you," and you stop at that, that is sympathy, what sympathy means.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Sara. And to go on from what Sara was sharing, feeling empathy requires us to be curious about someone else's point of view, to be able to share their emotional state. It's different than feeling sympathy, because you can be sympathetic only by, looking at a person from a distance and not being necessarily curious about how they think and why they think what they think and why they do what they do, for instance. In empathy, with empathy, you're able to both put yourself in the person's position and also maintain an observant status, as if you were looking at them from the outside. And there are three types of empathy that were mapped out by a recent psychologist, Daniel Goleman, and researcher as well. And the first type of empathy is cognitive empathy, which happens when you're able to understand someone else's point of view. Now, this does not mean that you have to change your mind because of them, or to change your opinion, or to enter an argument with them because now you understand how they think. This means simply being able to see the world from someone else's point of view, to understand how maybe their background, their story influenced them to see the world this way. So when you exercise empathy, you're able to rationally understand where the person is coming from. And this may happen maybe when you see a political speech that you don't necessarily agree with, or that you meet with a family member or a friend and you have different opinions about a topic. You can still understand where they're coming from and exercise cognitive empathy, but it doesn't mean that you're going to change anything in yourself because of that. The second kind of empathy is emotional empathy, and this happens when you're able to feel what the other person feels, when you're able to really celebrate with them if they're happy, to be sad with them if they're sad, if they, are frustrated or anything, to really feel what they're feeling as they tell you about the situation they lived, or as you observe them going through that situation. And this might happen with your close friends when they come to you to celebrate a victory, or if they're frustrated with something that didn't go well, and you're able to feel what they're feeling. The third and the final kind of empathy that was mapped out by researcher Danielle Goldman is compassive empathy. And compassive empathy happens when you are able to understand the person's point of view, you can feel how they feel, and you are ready to meet their needs. You are able to identify which needs they have and how you can use the resources that you have at the moment to meet their needs, and you can do so. So that's when compassive empathy comes to place. And for us as change makers, this is very common because we're used to, looking at social environmental problems and also understanding how they affect the people in our community, or even ourselves, even our families, and so on. And we're able to mobilize the resources that we have to tackle those social environmental problems. And when we do that, we're exercising compassive empathy. Now, it doesn't mean that those three different types are on different levels of empathy. It just means that you are going to exercise one or the other, or maybe a combination of two or three, or the three of them, in different moments in your life, in different situations with different people, and so on.
We need to be very careful with empathy, because I want to quote Rogers, another psychologist. He said that being empathetic is seeing the world through the eyes of the other, not the world reflected in their eyes. And this is something that I talk about a lot, and I discuss with sometimes with my husband, because sometimes we say, if I were in your position, I would do this or that, right? And that is not empathy. That is a game of, in my circumstances, with my body, with my the way I reflect about life, the way I feel, the way my brain is working. What would I do in your position? And that is not empathy, right? So what we want to do is seeing the eyes seeing the world in the eyes of the other. So sort of embodying that person in their circumstances, in their own thoughts, in their own opinions, in their own way of growing up, of everything, in their own context. How would it feel to be that person? And I think that is something that not only helps us to do better work as change makers, but also to understand why conflicts emerge, right? So we want to keep that in mind. And something that we haven't said before is that empathy is an integral part of what makes us human, and in essence of compassion. So we want to think about how us as change makers can not only be empathetic and compassionate towards others, but also sort of helping other people be more empathetic. So what we want to tell you as well is that empathy is something that you can build. It's not something that you're born with or without. So for example, there are some people that are not able to have the three types of empathy that Yas was mentioning. There are some certain conditions in which you can have cognitive empathy, but not emotional empathy. And those conditions are, well, to give you some example, are people with autism, or in the autism spectrum. They cannot feel the three of them, but they can feel cognitive empathy, for example. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And I really want to read you another quote by Raul Martinez. He's an activist, philosopher, really, really smart. He says that empathy is central to our humanity. Through it, we can feel another's elation, grief, pride, or shame. It is a foundation for love, intimacy, and community that enables us to achieve that most precious of things, connection. When we empathize with someone, we humanize them. Labels, categories, and the prejudices that accompany them fall away, and instead, we perceive a person worthy or of moral concern. It is the potential that gives empathy such power. So we cannot take empathy for granted in any work that we do, in anything, even if it's, I don't know, something that does not require a lot of personal relations. empathy is something that we want, and that we want to sort of to give other people. So some examples of how we can help other people, and especially children. You can ask them, really small children can understand what other people are feeling, and you can ask them, why do you think that other baby is crying? How do you think that girl is feeling now that her friend moved, or something like that? So sort of drawing a person's attention to other people's emotions during everyday encounters really helps them to sort of enlarge their capacity to being empathetic.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Sara. And going off of what Sara was saying about, putting yourself in other people's perspective, being able to see the world from their eyes, this connects us to social impact. And this is why empathy is important if we want to have effective social impact, because it allows you to understand other people's point of view, to grasp the social environmental issues from a human perspective, so to understand how the people affected by the problem directly relate to that problem, how they see the problem, what solutions they would propose to the problem. And then this also helps you to analyze your project's impact based on people needs and on people demands. So that's how that's why empathy is so important for social impact. It helps you not only grasp rationally how people feel, but also to feel it with them, to have put a human face to the issues that you're facing as a change maker, and to analyze the impacts that your project intends to have based on those feelings, based on those thoughts that you collected from the people affected by it. And as a result, combining all those benefits of using empathy for social impact, you are able to then implement more effective projects.
Exactly. You don't want to create a project that looks really cool, that's very nice for you, but you want to go outside and see who the beneficiaries are of the project that you're implementing. This is something that human-centered design does really well, is because you go back to the people that you're trying to help and ask them, is this something that works in their context, in their set of values, in the way they see the world? Because there's something that I also wanted to mention, is that we don't want to judge other people while we're helping them. So what we want to do is exactly that, empathize with them to see what is helpful for them, what isn't, what sort of adapts to their environment and what doesn't, without thinking, oh, but because of their religious beliefs or because of that, you don't want to stripe them of their culture, traditions, because that's a risk that we're gonna, Yas is gonna talk about a bit more about the risk that we have if we're not empathetic in the projects that we implement.
Exactly, because there are two main kinds of social entrepreneurs, so people who design solutions for social or environmental problems. We have the real entrepreneurs and we have the heropreneurs. And the heropreneurs are the ones, like Sara was saying, who create ideas and implement these wonderful ideas without exercising empathy before and during the process. So they think they are creating change because they are now a founder and they can call themselves a founder, CEO of this organization, social entrepreneur, social business leader, whatever it is. But actually, if you look at the ground, like to see the real impact that their initiative is making, it's either none or it's even a negative impact. So if you design a solution and you implement a solution without people's perspective, without taking into consideration how the people are affected on the ground and what they think of that problem and what they think of your solution even, you run the risk of being a heropreneur instead of an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur is the one who creates ideas and implements these ideas with the people affected by those problems and not only for the people. So you're not doing them a favor, you're not doing it for them, you're building it with them. You're bringing them in the creation process with you and in the implementation process with you, the evaluation process and all the steps of the way. the entrepreneur exercises empathy throughout this process. So when they're just brainstorming about the idea, when they decide to build a prototype and actually implement the idea, when they analyze the effects of that idea, the real entrepreneur really wants to know what's going on the ground, how people are relating to it, and so on. So empathy is important to make sure that you won't become a heropreneur and only have the title, only be able to say that you created something and not actually have impact. And empathy serves to make you a real entrepreneur who can listen for the needs on the ground and actually create something that will impact people meaningfully.
Exactly. Think about the heropreneurs are people that will do it for the pictures, will do it to get attention from the media. They want to go to a lot of conferences. They want to be out there. I'm not saying that going to conferences is a bad thing, not at all. But it is important to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So I've been studying psychology for quite a while now. And one of my professors used to say, well, it's cheaper if you want to study psychology because you want to work on yourself, it's cheaper to go to therapy yourself than to study psychology. So the thing is, you need to reflect why you're doing what you're doing. Why is that you want to create a project for some people in need for mental health, now that we've discussed that topic, right? I want to create this to create a better mental health, or to do something like that. And then why is it? Well, no, I want to create a that's already doing that, and maybe you can sum up the efforts and help them instead of you being the center of attention. Really, that's what we want you to reflect today. How is it that you want to help, and the why behind the things. And I don't know, we don't want to say by any means that any specific activity is wrong, that studying psychology is wrong, that going to conferences, it's not at all about that, but it is about the intentions the intentions that you have to do what you do.
Exactly. Always start with your why. If you want to create an idea, a project, if you want to create a social business, if you want to run for office as a young person, whatever it is, always start with why and have that purpose really, really clear before you go on to the how and the what. And the why is even better if it's built with the people who are going to be affected by your solution, if you're able to empathize with them and then turn that empathetic exercise into your purpose for creating the program. Not only something that will benefit you as a person, but that will really, really create an effective and meaningful impact in your community. Awesome. And then we brought some tips on how to exercise empathy and how to make sure you won't fall into the trap of becoming a heropreneur, and that actually your ideas will have effective impact. So first, be sure to listen actively and constantly. Be sure to put yourself in a learner's position, in a listener position, so that you can grasp how people are affected by the problem, but also how they're relating to your solution. What are the things that are working well? What are the things that are not? And listening actively also includes looking for facial expressions when you mention a certain aspect of your project, or observing body language, or observing, what is not being said. That is really important for your project. There's a study that says that 65% of our communication is nonverbal. So whenever you talk to your beneficiaries, your clients, the people who are involved, your team, who are involved in your project, always listen to them actively with all your senses, not only with your ears. Second, test your assumptions, and this will happen every time you implement a new project. There's always going to be assumptions to be tested, because you are coming in, as much as you try to have empathy, to be curious about others' perspectives and so on, you are bringing in your own background, your own experience, your own views into the project. That's inevitable. So whenever you're implementing a new project, always test your assumptions. Always make sure that the things that you assumed are real. And if they are not, think of ways that you can adapt and actually include the reality into the project that you're creating. Third, look for impact gaps.
And the risk,
Go
sorry,
ahead, Sara.
I wanted to just comment something on testing your assumptions, is that we need to be very careful. Prejudices about people, and our cognitive biases will channel our empathy towards a specific group or towards a specific program that we want to implement. And that's why we need to have not only the bound empathy, that is an empathy that is bound to the people that we know, that are familiar to us, but unbound, which means and directed towards all human beings and all beings in general, not selective. So we do need to test our assumptions, because we will have them. We will have prejudices, and instead of saying I don't have any, go to the field, what they think, what they feel about these topics, and then you can create something that will have a larger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the third tip that we have for you on how to exercise empathy to create better impact is look for impact gaps. So instead of just creating something new out of the blue without researching what's even out there, we invite you to do 3 steps into this. And this was mapped out by the person who coined the term Heropreneur, Professor Daniela Papi-Thornton from Oxford University. And she developed an impact gap canvas that helps entrepreneurs actually understand what their impact is going to be. And it starts with entrepreneurs mapping out the challenges they want to tackle in their community. So that could be climate change, that could be inequality, that could be technology divide, that could be anything that bothers you and you want to change, right? So that's the first thing. Map out the project, the challenge that you want to face. Second thing is map out the existing initiatives for that problem. So map out other student groups, NGOs, social enterprises, public services, anything that is to some extent already tackling that project. And then finally, think about how your project, your social enterprise, whatever it is, how it's going to fill the gap somehow. Are you really, having effective impact? Are you really doing something that will add, that will collaborate to your community, or are you just recreating something that someone else is doing? Because if you're doing the latter, then it most likely you're going to be competing for the same resources, the same donors, the same beneficiaries even, and it's not going to be as effective, the impact in the long term from a macro perspective. So make sure that as an entrepreneur, you're looking for the impact gaps and you know exactly how your project is going to add to the system as a whole, not to think of your project as something that's isolated outside of the impact system in your community and so on. So that's really important as well. And empathy comes in a really important way here, looking for the impact gaps, because you can also exercise empathy for the other people working in this area, understanding what their needs are and how you can benefit them in the bigger picture. So that's really important. The fourth thing is to be honest about your impact. So if something is not working well, don't pretend like it is. Don't just like push it under the carpet and be like, okay, we're not going to talk about this in our reports. We're not going to say about this problem to our donors or anything. Be honest about what's working well, and be honest about what's not working well for the people on the ground as well. And this really links to my next point, which is be open to feedback. And this means feedback from your team. This means feedback from your beneficiaries, your clients, your donors, all the stakeholders involved in the project. Be open to it. Be open to listening what they think, why they think so, and be honest about the real impact you're having, even if part of it is negative, even if you have to adapt. And this brings me to my last point as well. Always adapt and learn. So even if you receive feedback and you're honest about your impact, even the bad parts or the negative parts of it, be open to adapting and learning. Be open to have an open heart, have an open will, have an open mind, so that you were able to continue the process of improving your project and making sure that it has the best impact it can have for your community. And this is part of being a social entrepreneur as well. This is part of being a change maker, is being able to adapt, to being able to listen actively and really take what you listen into consideration, so that you can put the interests of the people you want to affect, of the problem you want to change, at the center of your solution. And this is what's going to make it the most effective. Awesome. And then here we have a quote by Barack Obama. He says, "Learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see through their eyes, that's how peace begins. And it's up to you to make that happen. Empathy is the quality of character that can change the world." So that's why empathy is so important, because it's crucial, it's fundamental to our work as change makers, because that's a quality that can really change problems, because it puts people at the center of it. It really shifts our perspective. It opens our minds. It opens our hearts. And most importantly, it opens our will to adapt, to change, and to constantly learn from the people on the ground.
Yes. So the first message we want to give to you is that we can take empathy in our own hands, in terms of we can use empathy in a way that helps or to improve the impact that we will have with our own projects, with the volunteer work that we're doing, and so on. Because there are, well, another quote by Raul Martinez. He says, "The heart-wrenching story of one person's death moves in a way that statistics about millions of fatalities never will." So what we want to do is, and this is why storytelling, so storytelling, the arts, and the exercises of asking questions are essential, because you want to create awareness on the specific thing that you want to change in the world. So a good way of doing that is by doing storytelling and using art as a tool. This is why us, for Global Changemakers, we've been telling stories through our newsletters, our podcasts, that we want to sort of create that, that closeness with the change makers. They are not just, change makers. It almost sounds like an object. No, they're human beings. They are Yasmin. They are Ego, Courtney, right? Millions more. But we want to create those very personal stories so that we can better relate to the issue that is at hand. This is something that we want to think when, for example, if we want to create more awareness on climate change, instead of just throwing statistics at people, just doing that, because I do feel that they are important, but only doing will not be powerful as a message, as sort of drawing an image of what could happen, or the effects that climate change can have in a person's life, right? So we want to sort of take advantage of that empathy in the way that we want to move the message, and we can do that way better tackling people's empathy.
Awesome, absolutely. Storytelling, I think, is one of the best techniques that we can use as change maker, not only to understand how people are affected by the problem, but also to communicate the impact of our ideas. As human beings, storytelling is like one of the first communication ways that we have found to pass on important lessons by generations, to be able to identify with other people, to tell about your own story, your family story. So storytelling is like almost innate for us as humans. And there is also a study that shows that if you give people a bunch of statistics and if you give them a story, they will most likely remember the story, and they will not remember the numbers after they leave the session, the lecture that you're giving, or whatever it is, right? So stories are way more effective because they create empathy. I think that's an amazing point. Awesome. And then going on, there's a really common challenge that a lot of change makers faced, and a lot of them do, including myself. I've faced this challenge many times, and that's compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue happens when compassion or empathy starts feeling like a burden and not a motivator to act, not something that will motivate you to create a project, to create change and so on, but it starts feeling overwhelming and stresses you out. And when that happens, you might have a red flag. And now we have a few tips to help you avoid compassion fatigue from, taking control over you. And of course, this includes taking care of yourself. It's the whole metaphor that we always hear in the plane. Put the oxygen mask in yourself first and then put it on someone else, right? So empathy only works when you really take care of yourself as a leader, as a change maker. And to avoid compassion fatigue from happening, here are some tips, right? The first one, notice when you've absorbed problems or emotions from other people. Notice when that is getting to you, when it's more than just listening to them, when it's more than just observing them, when it's actually starting to feel like a burden for you, feel like it's something that you have to carry along the way. Second, if you notice that that's happening, try to open up with a trusted family member, a friend, a colleague. Let them know that this is going on. Only by speaking about it, this can already start healing you and having that compassion fatigue go away. So talking about it is a great thing that you can do if you trust someone that will listen to you. Third, learn how to clarify and respect your personal boundaries. And this is really important. I heard a metaphor the other day at a self-knowledge group for women. Someone said that the river can only flow because it has boundaries. If the river had no boundaries, the water would stay fixed in one place. It wouldn't even move. So the only reason why the river can flow and bring water to other people and bring fruits and flowers and so on, whatever it goes, is because it has boundaries. And so for us as humans, it's pretty much similar, right? So we have to understand what our boundaries are and clarify them and be able to communicate them as well. So if I understand that I have a personal boundary when it comes to, I don't know, health issues, because that's what my project deals with. And for me, it's hard when I have to hear about too many people, say, dying of COVID or getting infected by treatable diseases, for instance. Then I will automatically, control the amount of news that I watch or that I read. I will avoid maybe talking about that issue with people I don't trust, or avoid talking about it every day, or your boundaries, what you can do. This is different for every person, but it's really important that you know them and that you respect them, that you don't go over them too often. Otherwise, compassion fatigue most likely will happen. The other thing is value what you can do and not only what is outside your borders. So, if you have a project that's dealing with COVID-19 prevention, and you can only help 100 people from your community, you cannot prevent 1 million people from dying of COVID. Even so, appreciate what you can do at the moment. Appreciate the resources that you already have and see value in it. Appreciate the work that you do. Don't only, look at the things that you cannot do because of your limits, because of lack of resources or whatever reason, but always appreciate what you can do and thank people around you for for supporting you in this, and understand that no change is too small to happen. So even if you cannot change the whole world, if you can only change your surroundings, that's already more than enough. So appreciate the work that you're already doing. The other thing is feel comfortable to express what you need, again, with people that you trust, people who work with you, your friends, people who live with you, and so on. Express if you need space, if you need rest, if you need, I don't know, caring, if you need to feel loved, if you need to play and entertain yourself, be able to connect yourself to your needs, express them and respect them and meet your needs. This is really important as well to avoid, to prevent you from only looking to other people and not looking to yourself, because that's mostly when compassion fatigue happens. You're looking too much at others and you're forgetting about yourself. So it's expressing what you need, being in contact, in personal touch with your own feelings, with your own needs, will help you prevent this from happening. And the last thing we wanted to mention is, if you feel like this is going on a lot, if you feel like this is preventing you from reaching your goals, if this is affecting your work or your relationships, seek professional help, seek a therapist, you know, find out who are the psychologists that you can trust in your community and so on. I'm sure there's lots of options in your community. So this would be, you know, something that you should look for if you feel like empathy is starting to become a burden. It should not become a burden for you as a change maker. And it's really important that you are able to exercise empathy and compassion without this getting to you, without this compromising your mental health. So that's really important as well.
It is about
Also,
creating a schedule that is actually in tune with what you want to do and your priorities. So learning how to say no is something that also will put you on the road to mental health and just wellness. We oftentimes, as change makers, want to do a lot of things at the same time, and we're invited to speak at events and to volunteer for this and for that. But we need to have a schedule and an agenda, a general calendar that will reflect your priorities. And I always use Yas's example, because Yas will even schedule in her calendar time with friends, time to play music and have fun, because that's also something very important and a priority for her and for most of us. So we need to schedule that in, not on the time if we have time, because we will never have enough time. So just to keep that in mind.
yeah, exactly. And the reason why I learned to do that is because that's exactly what I realized, that if I don't schedule time for me, then my tendency is to say yes to a bunch of stuff and then forget about myself. And that really starts impacting people as well, because like I said earlier, we need to be well with ourselves to be able to help others. We need to put the oxygen mask in ourselves first before we can put it in other people. So being empathetic and being a change maker is really important, but also you need to be able to take care of yourself so that you can exercise empathy. Because like you saw, compassion fatigue prevents you from exercising compassion and empathy, because that starts to become a burden for you. So if you don't take care of yourself, you won't even be able to exercise empathy for others. So it's really important. This is not about being selfish. It's just like, you need to take care of yourself to be able to be a change maker. Otherwise, this is going to start to become a burden for you. So yeah, and to talk a little bit more about our experience with empathy and social impact, for me, this has been very much about learning to take care of myself, to be able to exercise empathy, and learning where my boundaries are and learning to say no. Recently, I read a book about basically personal boundaries and say no, basically about this whole topic. And the author was saying how Steve Jobs, the guy who created, the iPhone and founded Apple and so on, he said that the iPhone came to life because of all the projects he said no to. And not necessarily because he said yes to this one, but because he said no to so many other ideas, then this one came to life, right? So saying no is just part of life, and it's something that we should be more used to doing, I think, as change makers. And for me, this has been my journey with empathy and social impact, understanding myself to be able to understand others. What about you, Sarah?
Yes, I resonate with every single word that you just said, because it's pretty much the same. How how can I be okay so that I can serve others better? If I decided that service will be my one of the main things that I want to do in life, and what I want to do in life, then how do I take care of myself to be able to take others? And there's this saying that I'm not sure I'm going to translate well, but it's sort of, do not trust a naked guy offering you clothes, right? We would never trust someone offering you something that they don't have. So if we have something, if we're well, even if not in 100%, but mostly we're fine and we're okay, then we will be able and will be fit to serve others.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Sara. Great. I think that was it for the webinar today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Make sure to follow Global Changemakers on social media and stay in touch with us. We always have new webinars coming up. We have podcast episodes coming up. We have a mentorship program. We have free toolkits. We have a Changemaker School, which is an online school to teach changemakers about how to manage impactful social projects. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities for you to continue engaged with us. Make sure that you do, and it's going to be a great pleasure to stay in touch with you. If you have any comments on this video, feel free to type them below. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us as well. But other than that, stay safe, stay well, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.